council members Allen, Cap, Cortez, Gamble, Coupin, Parker, Rutherford, and Vo being present. First is our public comment period, and we did have 3 individuals sign up ahead of time to give public comment. First is Mr. Charles Couture, speaking on BL 2025-113 in support. Mr. Couture, if you're here, please come up to the mic. Are you sure? It says plan. They sign up for the wrong committee. It's probably the wrong sheet set up. Is this the right sheet for me to read from? They're all in the same. Okay. It looks like we may have had some mix up with the public comment sign up sheet. Is there anybody here who wishes to give public comment? Seeing none, I'll declare the public comment period closed. Today, we will go through our consent agenda, our items not on consent, and then for purely discussion purposes, we have time reserved for the discussion of the housing and infrastructure bills. Today is purely for discussion purposes. We will not be taking a vote on them, but rather an opportunity to discuss as a committee as well as hear from planning on that. I currently have every item on the consent agenda. Before I proceed to read the captions, does any committee member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Have some. I don't think we have any. Do a 1 month. Yeah, I'll pull it off. Yeah, I'll pull it off and do a 1 month. Okay, seeing none, I'll now proceed to read the captions. Item number 1, RS 2025-1629, sponsors Toombs, Horton, Huffman, Allen, Gadd, and Spain, a resolution approving the 7th Amendment to a grant contract for constructing affordable housing approved by RS 2017-965 between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Housing Trust Fund Commission and Affordable Housing Resources. Item number 2, RS 2025-1651, sponsors Toomb, Horton, and Evans Siegel, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to abandon fire hydrant assembly and to accept new fire hydrant assembly for property located at 888B West Trinity Lane, also known as Northview Senior Living. Item 3, RS 2025-1652, sponsors Gamble, Horton, and Evans Siegel, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new public sanitary sewer force main for 3 properties located at 4056, 4062, and 4080 Brick Church Pike, also known as the Brick Church Pike Sewer Extension. Item 4, RS 2025-1653, sponsors Gamble, Horton, and Evans Siegel, a resolution authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new public water main, fire hydrant assembly, and sanitary sewer manhole for property located at 403 Ewing Drive. Item 5, BL 2025-1119, sponsors Gregg, Toombs, Horton, Evans Siegel, Vo, Gadd, and Allen, an ordinance approving a greenway conservation easement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County through the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreation and Riverwalk at Mill Creek Home Associations, Inc. for greenway improvements at 700B Mill Creek Meadow Drive. Item 6, BL 2025-1120, sponsors Harrell, Toombs, Horton, Evans Siegel, Vo, Welsh, and Allen. An ordinance approving a greenway conservation easement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County through the Metropolitan Board of Parks and Recreations and DR Horton, Inc. for greenway improvements at 4399 Maxwell Road. Item 7, BL 2025-1122, sponsors Coupin, Horton, and Evans Siegel, an ordinance authorizing 450 to 460 Bidco LLC to construct, install, and maintain 2 underground encroachments and 1 aerial encroachment at 450 and 460 James Robertson Parkway. Item 8, BL 2025-1123, sponsors Vo, Horton, and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing Nashville Phase 1 property holder LLC to construct and install aerial and underground encroachments at 512 Houston Street. Item 9, BL 2025-1124, sponsors Horton and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to acquire permanent and temporary easements through negotiation, condemnation, and acceptance for the 1219 Battlefield Drive Stormwater Improvement Project for 3 properties located at 1217C and 1219C Battlefield Drive and 1208 Clifton Lane. Item 10, BL 2025-1125, sponsors Horton and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to abandon existing public utility and drainage easement rights for property located at 1702 Temple Avenue. Item 11, BL 2025-1126, sponsors Bradford, Horton, and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new public sanitary sewer mains, sanitary manholes, and easements for 2 property located at 1300 and 1310 Donaldson Pike, also known as Runway Logistics Out Parcel. Item 12, BL 2025-1127, sponsors Ewing, Horton, and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to abandon existing public sanitary sewer mains, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements, and to accept new public sanitary sewer main and sanitary sewer manholes for 3 properties located at 3909 and 3911C Cross Creek Road and 2311C Abbott Martin Road. Item 13, BL 2025-1128, sponsors Horton and Evan Siegel, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to abandon existing public water and sanitary sewer main, fire hydrant assembly, sanitary sewer manhole, and easements, and to accept new public water main, fire hydrant assembly, sanitary sewer manhole, and easements for property located at 40 White Bridge Pike, also known as Noble Richland Creek. Item 14, BL 2025-1129, sponsors Toombs, Horton, Evan Siegel, and Gadd, an ordinance authorizing the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County to accept new public water main and sanitary sewer mains, fire hydrant assembly, and sanitary sewer manholes and easements for property located at 901 Haggard Street, also known as 325 West Trinity, Madison Trinity. Item 15, BL 2025-1022, sponsors Bradford, an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by amending a specific plan on property located at 3325 McGavick Pike, approximately 550 feet southwest of Murfreesboro Pike, to permit 71 multifamily residential units. Item 16, sponsors Bradford, BL 2025-1023, sponsors Bradford, an ordinance to authorize building material restrictions and requirements for BL 2025-1022. Item 17, BL 2025-1088, sponsors Horton, an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by amending a portion of a specific plan on property located at 6100 Robertson Avenue at the northwest corner of Vernon Avenue and Robertson Avenue, zoned SP, to permit additional non-residential uses. Item 18, BL 2025-1091, sponsors Hancock, an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by changing from RS10 to R10 zoning for property located at 510 Neely's Bend Road, approximately 262 feet west of Neely's Chase Drive. Item 19, BL 2025-1092, sponsors Horton, an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by changing from R8 to MULANS zoning for property located at 5701 Robertson Avenue, located at the corner of Robertson Avenue and Midland Avenue. Item 20, BL 2025-1093, sponsors Harrell, an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by changing from AR2A to SP zoning for properties located at 2334 Hobson Pike and Hobson Pike unnumbered, approximately 808 feet west of Smith Springs Parkway, to permit 105 residential units. Item 21, BL 2025-1094, sponsors Harrell, an ordinance to authorize building material restrictions and requirements for BL 2025-1093. Item 22, BL 2025-1095, sponsors Vo, an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by changing from R6, MUL-ANS, and IWD to SP zoning for various properties located south of Hart Street along First Avenue South, Second Avenue South, and Andrew T. Whitmore Street, located at the corner of First Avenue South and Hart Street, and partially within the Wedgwood, Houston, Chestnut Hill urban design overlay to permit a mixed-use development. Item 2023, BL 2025-1096, sponsors vote, an ordinance to authorize building material restrictions and requirements for BL 2025-1095. Item 24, BL 2025-1097, sponsors Hancock, an ordinance to amend Title 17 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, the zoning ordinance of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County by changing from RS10 to R10 zoning for property located at 908 Hospital Drive, approximately 212 feet east of Kinsey Boulevard. That concludes our consent agenda. Is there any items that need to come off the consent agenda? Seeing none, do we have a motion? Moved and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Any not voting? The consent agenda is approved. 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. There are no reports from the chair, and now we will proceed to our discussion of the housing and infrastructure legislation. That is BL 2025-1005, BL 2025-1006, BL 2025-1007, and finally BL 2025-1008. Our anticipation is for this to be more of a discussion and question and answer session rather than a formal presentation by planning. I guess I'll open it up now to see if any committee members or other council members attending would like to discuss or ask any questions of the planning. Councilmember Gamble, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate this opportunity to discuss these bills, and particularly the amendments, the proposed amendments, and be helpful if planning can give us some feedback on some of the amendments, particularly amendment for 1005, talking about Bill 1005, and the amendments 1, 2, and 3. If you could just speak briefly about the appropriateness or how these would factor into the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the planning table. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Sure, I will go one by one through on those amendments and give a summary quickly of the amendment and then some thoughts that we had upon sort of analyzing those amendments. So the first amendment, amendment number 1 to 2025-1005, would limit RN and RL to no more than 30% of a block face on a local street. Some of the concerns that we had with this approach to limitations in regards to a zoning district, there are some cases where our zoning code specifies distance requirements for certain uses or distances between certain noxious uses and homes, but we couldn't find or can't find where the zoning code actually describes or prescribes how districts or where districts should be applied. And so in other words, where you might have I know that there are certain distance requirements between I think certain alternative financial institutions where they can't be located a certain distance from each other. That's a use restriction based on known sort of negative impacts that have been documented well from those uses, but that is not a restriction on the zoning districts themselves where those are permitted. And so trying to limit the application of RN and RL as in the same way that we would potentially limit noxious uses is an inappropriate tool in our mind. Additionally, it would uniquely limit these new zoning districts, which have more design control other more intense zoning districts. And then finally, the 30% as written in the ordinance is not defined. It could be acreage, number of units, linear feet of frontage. There's no definition for what is meant by that 30%. But most importantly, the zoning code establishes zoning districts, but does not say where zoning districts should be applied. That is the role of policy. So that's the first one. I'm happy to pause there if you want.
That would be great. Thank you so much for that. And I'd like to go, if we can, to the sponsor to find out what the intent was. And it sounds like this may not be the right way. But anyway, we can go to the sponsor. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on that. So I had asked the legal folks to come up with language and perhaps between translation and legal and stuff like that, we didn't totally get to the intent, but I appreciate the first step to get there. So my goal was simply to be responsive to what we're hearing from people with concerns that they don't necessarily know that this would be a great thing to transform an entire local street. And this is limited to local streets, I believe, which is appropriate. My goal was to say, I have continued to write in my newsletters that there are great examples of neighborhood-scaled multifamily apartments and quadplexes and townhomes nestled into neighborhoods where there is one on the street and it is not impactful and no one's mad about it. And it is a benefit to the neighborhood that otherwise has very large houses. And then there's this one, 16-unit apartment complex that's only 3 stories tall and it fits right in there. However, if it were possible, because the whole neighborhood were rezoned RN to allow those, that then every single house on the street would be torn down and replaced with that's a transformative process, which may be good for more housing, but in terms of neighborhoods that are beloved and a great place to raise a family, that may be more impactful than what we want. So the goal was to simply try to come up with some way that could say, yes, this is great. We should allow one on lots of local streets, but we shouldn't allow the entire block to be transformed. If there's a better way to do it that fits within the parameters, I would love for someone who has more expertise than I to come up with that language.
I think I also saw a question from Councilmember Parker on this. I'll go to him quickly before we go back to planning. Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I definitely appreciate what the sponsor is trying to accomplish here. I mean, I think one of the best ways we have to sort of accomplish that is, electing district council members who know their areas and know what people want to see. For better or worse, councilmatic courtesy is the rule of the road in this body for the most part. And, I think that if members know that they have spots like that where it wouldn't be appropriate, I think we can just kind of count on district council members to do their job there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. I had a question myself as well for the sponsor, Councilmember Allen. I think by limiting the application of this rule to solely to RN and RL, might it have the unintended effect if they wish to redevelop into multifamily by making the remaining lots different RM districts, which are not subject to this limitation. So we would just be incentivizing multifamily units, but without the design restrictions that accompanies this.
I would rely on the wisdom of the district council member in that case.
Any further discussion on, I'll go back to planning. Planning, you're recognized.
I just, one more point. The RN and the RL districts do permit single family and duplexes as well. They don't mandate that you have 3 or more units per lot. They do permit a range of uses. And so much like commercial districts, or mixed use districts, they allow a range. And so it's not a mandate. It's just, it just allows more optionality.
Thank you. And a question for planning as well. I mean, by limiting it to 30%, however we define that, might that also have the unintended side effect of encouraging people to rush to get the rezoning first, rather than perhaps, and so whoever applies first up until it reaches the 30% would benefit from it, rather than perhaps whatever block on the street is most appropriately suited for it?
I think that we haven't been able to study sort of practical application of if this were to be implemented. I think that fundamentally, we don't believe that the zoning code should be sort of prescribing where zoning districts are applied. That is more of the role of the land use policy for determining where zoning districts are appropriate, not the zoning code. Again, there is some language in zoning around noxious uses and the separation of those noxious uses either from each other or from housing, but housing is not, in our view, a noxious use. And so it shouldn't sort of have the same applicability of separation.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this proposed amendment? Okay,
Can
seeing
you go
none,
to the next one?
let's go to the next one.
Okay, sure. So the second one was amendment number 2, which says that at the time of application, an applicant must declare the max number of units to be built on a site. Some comments that we had about this, there aren't any clear mechanisms for recording the intent and communicating it to property owners, neighbors, or prospective buyers. It's indicated that it's at the time of application, but I don't know that you could actually restrict it to that number once, if the zoning goes through. Additionally, it's not clear whether that would be something that would prevent a property from then being rezoned to a higher declaration of density. We weren't sure what the intent was. There are other zoning districts that use bulk standards like mixed use, for instance, and commercial, where they are not required to declare a density requirement or to declare a use. So for instance, if someone comes in and rezones to CS, they aren't required to say, I want to rezone to CS and I'm going to build a gas station, and then they're held to that. They're requesting to build CS, and then they have to meet all of the bulk standards, and they're permitted any of the uses that are outlined in the code.
Thank you. I see Councilmember Johnston. Let me find your icon. Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
Thank you. This isn't my amendment, but I think the intent is to take away some of the ambiguity around it for the neighbors, so that when someone is rezoning to RN, that when they're having whatever community engagement, that the community knows exactly what's going in, versus having this plethora of options, so that there's just more clarity around the intent of the developer. So for example, there's a difference between R8 and R15, and they know that's, you know what I mean? You're going to know for all intents and purposes what's going to be built there. Whereas RN has so many different varieties of things that can go. It's hard for a community to say, have any sort of opinion on it when it's like, well, is it going to be a duplex, or is it going to be a manor house, or is it going to be a this, or is it going to be a that? So I'm not saying what this amendment, if you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm just telling you that was the intent, was just to give more clarity to the community on what they can expect from that certain parcel or group of parcels as it's being amended. So if there's a tool for us to do that, I think that would be helpful to sort of bring the temperature down again, and to have better transparency on what a certain developer would want to do.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. I saw Councilmember Parker had his hand up as well. I'll go back to him. Councilmember Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, this is something that we have like a lot of development proposals in my part of town, and this is something that we've really, you know, when someone is pursuing a base zoning of any type, you know, they could be the most cordial, kindest face for that project and that proposed rezoning, but I always like to explain to folks that are interested in the proposal that, you know, here's what they could do. Now, this nice man or woman or whoever is saying that they're going to build daycare there, but they're seeking, you know, CS. And here's all the other stuff they could do in CS. And maybe people are okay with all the other stuff they could do in CS. But often when you change to a base zoning, a project might change hands, the property might be sold, the next person might not have a similar vision to what was presented to the community. So, I mean, whether it's these new districts or whether it's, you know, existing base districts, like if it's important for, if it's like an important site and people have concerns about what could potentially be allowed, I mean, I would just use an SP in those cases. Like it could be a regulatory SP. I know that we try to be diligent about that because it does introduce some additional like review through the process and it's a little bit more burdensome. But, you know, if if for your community to be comfortable with something and they need that certainty, I would just use an SP there. I wouldn't say that we're going to introduce this new layer to specific zoning districts. We don't do that with any of the other 100+ zoning districts that we have. So I would just, again, sometimes we say if the details are important, get it in writing. And by that, we usually mean an SP for a given project and not a base zoning. So if that certainty is needed, that's what I would recommend rather than any base zoning in that case.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I see we've just been joined by, I believe, the sponsor of this amendment, Councilmember Druffel. We're discussing your amendment to BL 2025-1005. Do you wish to be recognized on this one, Councilmember? I thought the one that was filed at the last meeting, Councilmember Druffel, I'll go to you if you wish to be recognized. Just give me one moment. There you are. The one about the declaration of density that was filed the last meeting. Sorry to catch you right when you're walking in.
Which one is it? I had several amendments to 105. I apologize. I thought this was going to be, I was told that it would be heard before the next meeting.
Or does, this meeting is purely for discussion purposes. We're not holding a vote today. At the next committee meeting, we will be voting on these items as regular committee agenda items.
Can I ask to come back in about 5 minutes?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnston, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I appreciate what Councilmember Parker says because that's the truth. If you want, it's always dangerous when you go, yeah, but they could do this, and we know what that. So to do an SP, but I think that sort of defeats the purpose of these new zoning codes if the answer is we'll just do an SP. So I'm wondering if planning has a response because they know the intent, which is just to provide more clarity around what the developer is wanting to do without having to do an SP, because I think that was being discouraged because there were so many SPs that it's just sort of cumbersome, which I understand, but at the same time, it's the only tool that we have to provide clarity and transparency around intent and to have any sort of teeth in that zoning where it's like, no, I'm sorry, you cannot do that without another rezone type thing. So do you have a response to sort of the conversation that myself and Councilmember Parker have been having on what's the answer there?
Go ahead, planning.
Okay, sure. What I would say is that there are different types of certainty depending on the type of zoning. So for instance, for let's say RM4, there's a certainty in the number of units, but there's certainty on little else. For SPs, there's certainty on a whole lot. So you sort of have RM4 number, SP a whole lot. These RN and RL are designed to give you a lot more certainty in the design. So the number to us is less critical because there's a lot more certainty on location of the buildings and how the buildings front and the form and what the size is and the footprint. And so it's a different type of certainty, although it may not be a certainty in the number of units at the time that it would be applied.
Councilmember Johnson, please go ahead.
Thanks. So when we're hearing from the community that that's the biggest challenge that they're having is this, very large increase in density in their neighborhood. If there's a way to provide I get the certainty around the design 100%, and I agree with it. But if there's a way that we can add something to these zoning codes in order to make more clear the intent of the increase in density, for example, RN8 or RN4 or RN, so because, what we're hearing constantly is that challenge of we don't know what this is and the increase in density is what a significant increase in density is what is being pushed back on in certain areas, which is understandable to Councilmember Allen's point. So is there a way for us to provide not only the context and the design, but to also give more clarity, even if it's within a range as far as number of units?
Councilmember Johnson, we've unfortunately we've only got this room for a couple more minutes. We got it for as long as we could. In the interest of covering more ground, I'm going to ask we move on to another amendment. Of course, we do have another committee meeting in which we'll be free to discuss these more, and we'll try to get us more time at that next committee meeting. But for now, I'll ask Planning to move on to the next amendment, please. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. And we are making notes of your comments as well. So, yeah. So the third amendment proposed to 1005 would require 2 community meetings prior to council public hearing for any RN or RL districts, and notice would be required. The concerns with this amendment are as it changes the process around rezonings for only 2 zoning districts within the code. These zoning districts are not the most intense zoning districts within the code by far. Requiring 2 community meetings for neighborhood scale multifamily residential districts would be greater than the requirement for rezoning to higher intensity multifamily, commercial, or industrial districts.
Thank you for that explanation. I see Councilmember Ellis has her hand up. Councilmember Ellis, you're recognized.
So my question is going back to when we passed the resolution for the pattern book. If one of those options are selected, the requirements that you're saying for the community meetings, would those still apply?
Go ahead, Planning.
So there was a request to draft a pattern book, and that work has not been done because of the work of the housing and infrastructure study. And we didn't want to create patterns for zoning districts that had not yet been created. And so we needed to make sure that we needed to wait until all of this other work was done. The amendment, I'm just going based on what is drafted, and it just says for any application of RN or RL before public hearing, there would have to be 2 community meetings. But it's only for those 2 districts. It doesn't give any exemptions, and it doesn't apply to any other zoning districts.
Any further questions on this amendment? Okay, I don't see any. Planning, if you'd like to go to the next proposed amendment, please.
Sure. I think I'm on Amendment 1 to BL 2025-1006. Oh, sorry. Amendment number 4 to 1005 requires infrastructure and fiscal impact report for any amendments related to RN and RL. So there are currently evaluations of existing infrastructure that take place with all required zoning changes. We look at school impact and trip generation analysis are performed prior to the Planning Commission meeting. Watering and sewer capacity are analyzed prior to any building permit issuance. This amendment would be a duplication of existing efforts, given that there is already analysis done of infrastructure prior to or at the time of rezoning requests.
Thank you for that explanation. Any questions or comments by members of the committee or otherwise? I see Councilmember Druffel, is your hand up?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thanks, Chair. Just to add on was that the requirement here is for the most recent infrastructure studies, such as the multimodal study, the master plan, be used for these requirements for the future and not just, past history. So that is what's expected in this amendment, is to then provide the most recent, whether it's the most recent stormwater master plan or the multimodal master plan, to be used for consideration for these future zoning requests.
Thank you for that explanation. Any further discussion by any members of the committee or otherwise that are here? Okay, I don't see any, so I'll ask Planning to go to the next one, please.
Sure. The next was Amendment number 1 to Ordinance BL 2025-1006. This would limit duplexes to no more than 25% of a block face on local streets. This amendment would actually take away existing property rights for 2-family uses, where many properties currently enjoy. Properties that are zoned 1 and 2 family now are permitted to have duplexes if certain conditions are applied. If this was passed, and added to the bill, it would actually limit many properties that currently have the opportunity for duplexes.
Thank you for that explanation. Any discussion or questions regarding this amendment? Councilmember Allen, please
Just
go
very
ahead.
quickly, currently, there is a very complicated thing about certain subdivisions before something whatever that says those will be limited to 25% duplexes. So that was sort of the model for this. I understand that if it's not legal, I'm not going to push it. But that is, I think, one example in there where we do talk about the number of 25% being limited. We're getting rid of it because it's complicated, not because it's wrong necessarily, is my understanding. But
Please.
I will also acknowledge that we can't take rights that exist today and do away with them, so I accept that.
Sure. One thing about the subdivisions that you mentioned it was ones that were created, or any new subdivisions, I think it was after 1984. What we have found most often is in subdivisions that were new subdivisions created in R-zoned districts, for the lots to be eligible for a duplex, they were limited to 25%, but they also had to meet the minimum lot size. Most subdivisions that were created after that time actually clustered lots, meaning that the lots were smaller. And so most didn't set aside 25%, even though they could, because the lots didn't meet the minimum lot size because they were smaller in exchange for common open space. And so even though we're getting rid of that, those subdivisions would still be limited because the lot sizes don't meet the minimum lot size requirement. Does that make sense? So it was a bit of a trade-off for that 25% limit because it was a lot size versus clustering. Yeah, okay. I'm going to move to the next if that's do you want me to keep going or are we out?
Unfortunately,
Okay.
we're out of time, and I want to be considerate to Chair Toombs and our friends in Budget and Finance. Of course, this will be discussed at our next committee meeting as well, so I encourage all committee members as well as any other members of the council to please attend our next committee meeting as well. We'll try to get the room for as long as we can to allow a full discussion of that. Thank you. We're adjourned.